Excuse me, I think my voice is better than this, but it starts badly. I am so thrilled to be here. I have never been in such a hothouse of international ophthalmology in my life, and I've been in a lot of places, a lot of other training programs, other institutions, and it's been a thrilling day. And I've talked about myself almost all day, so I am reluctant to continue doing it for being repetitive, but I do want to get across some. Oh, thank you, actually. Holy smokes, I didn't know that was vodka. I really, I think the privilege of, I want to thank Dr. Howler for letting me be here, and also Brad Feldman. I'll tell you more about that if I can. You know, Lincoln wrote his notes on an envelope, and I thought I'd do that on the Omni thing, and because it's so important. It's that important to me that I get across some thoughts. To me, academic global ophthalmology is a very obvious statement. How could any institution consider that what it does is something mundane like global ophthalmology when global academic is the key word that should catch on, and yet it hasn't so far. Most people refer to global ophthalmology. I hope that starting in this now or in the near future, that because it'll be popularized here and because the influence that AGO may have elsewhere, that everybody will soon, in institutions such as this, will soon begin to talk about academic global ophthalmology, because that, after all, is what we want to do. We want to elevate the level of our profession as it is brought to internationally. It sounds so simple. It's not that simple. There are two main components for AGO, as I see it. One component is what happens overseas as we as ophthalmologists relate to the NGOs and to the medical industrial complex, to the other countries where our colleagues in ophthalmology are located, and to those who we send out there to learn to represent our country, not as ugly Americans, but as enthusiasts who are not there as ocular tourists, as we say, but are there because they have a very important purpose. And those residents who spoke here today illustrate so beautifully what I consider optimal academic ophthalmology. It's not simple, I say, because there's another part of it, and that is that it's the feeling of those of us who are energetic about academic ophthalmology that it AGO, as I'll call it. That means GO plus an awful lot more that comes with it. So the domestic part of it is to increase the role of teaching of public health. Public health has no assigned cubbyhole within our subspecialty, and it's time it does. There are other entities, or I think optometry, for example, is very aware of the role of public health. We are too, but we haven't placed it anyplace, and we should have in our curriculum specific instructions about that relate to that. If the mathematics of population analysis, it becomes very useful also in one's own research reports. So there's a certain mathematics that relate to it. But population concern certainly doesn't escape us. So we as people taking care of individuals also have to consider our role and obligation in caring for populations. So that's on one side at home. That's what goes on within the American Academy of Ophthalmology, I hope, through increasing stimulus from wills. Whereas abroad, I hope also that there'll be more coordination of the various activities within this AGO, so that there'll be collaboration between institutions and with entities overseas, that it becomes more of a collegial relationship. The NGOs generally, and the leading ones, have been there for a long time. They're often run by very qualified people, but they have their own board, which they should continue to. They do things the way they've done them for a long time, with some evolutionary process, but sometimes I believe they would be very grateful had they easy access to ophthalmology, and also to personnel that could be sent to visit the work that they're doing in the field for skilled advice and help in their missions. So all of this is a part of elevating the role of the academic ophthalmologist. I want to say that I'm here at Wills, and I know that you've been first in a lot of things, like the first eye hospital in the world, I think in 1832, if I read the thing down here that says skill with compassion, which I think is just perfect for academic global ophthalmology, skill with compassion. You also had the first training program. That anteceded an awful lot going on. Also out of Philadelphia many years ago, there was a man named Osler, William Osler, who was a part of the eye service at the University of Pennsylvania. And in 1888, when he gave an address to the medical students that he had been teaching and the faculty, he introduced a word that I know is very familiar to you, Julia, and that is I'm sorry, I can spell it so well. Aquanimitas. Aquanimitas. It's Aquanimitas. It just means, well, it means calmness or equanimity, but it means much more than that, as he intended it to mean when he addressed the students, and which is a word that he brought then to Hopkins in 1888 when he joined the burgeoning new faculty that was created with Drs. Welch as the dean and Dr. Halstead as the surgeon and Dr. Kelly as the OBGYN doctor. And those four doctors were the great people, as many of you know about, in the so-called age of heroic medicine that happened between 1883 and 1920. And in that period of time, Dr. Osler, later Sir William Osler, insisted on the spirit of the Iron Man. I had lunch at the Iron Hand today, and so it's not to be confused with that. It's not a chef thing. It's the Iron Man of ophthalmology, as he instituted it, is the person so completely dedicated to the cause for which he works, tirelessly and with the devotion of somebody to his profession that exceeds really any other such identification of doctors and to their work. And that was then a contagion that occurred in quite a few other leading medical centers in the country thereafter. And it still exists in a very strong form at Johns Hopkins, where Dr. Haller's father, she alluded to, was one of my admired friends, only slightly a year or two older than I. I looked up to him, and he was always a great deal of fun, a tremendous energy that he had, a modest person who contributed immensely to pediatric surgery, and a person who represented that same spirit of energy and modesty and devotion. I think when I look around and see that Bill Tasman is here, I get that same issue from him of his sort of self-effacing kindness and modesty that he represented in all the many phases of our profession that he was active in. He's even so kind as to share his portrait with two dogs. Beyond understanding. Anyway, the other thing that I want to move into is fundraising for it. But Nick and I and others met this morning and talked at great length about it, and I found out that he's written a wonderful manual on fundraising, so there really is nothing much more that I can say other than this, that if one has to do fundraising in any project if you want it to start up and survive. And that the only secret to that is to be sure that you've researched it thoroughly, that you know what you're talking about. Second is, after that, to be sure that you think it's something you really believe in strongly, and then to share that same opinion with enthusiasm and total honesty with whoever it is that you're trying to raise money from. And that usually you start with individuals, and you go from there to foundations and larger foundations. And for AGO, I think it's a shoo-in for popularity with persons who are asked if they would wish to support this new endeavor. It's nothing new in some senses. It's just a new focus and a new emphasis. The fellowship, for example, in my view at least, should be an opportunity for a carefully chosen person who has finished her or his fellowship in one of the subspecialties, and after that would like to have an additional year going on for training to become a leader of academic global ophthalmology. And in that year, in my view, that person should go to several countries and get involved in their programs, very different ones. Let's say India, Africa, China is three typical, very different opportunities. And then that person has been accepted for his appointment with the understanding that she or he will go back to a full-time position, or it doesn't need to be full-time. It means, what I meant to say is that it goes back to a department faculty post in which that person earns part of his or her living through patient care, in most cases probably, but also receives a stipend for the further instruction and the pursuit of the development of academic global ophthalmology. What it needs is a certain nucleus of active people. One, at least this program could train one each year, and that would soon lead to a very important contribution of very well-trained persons. But also other programs, I hope, would begin to take that up. And as Dr. Feldman increasingly participates in this, and he has been doing for, I got to tell you that he and I have been in contact for about 2 years in this, and he has already made big contributions to the conceptualization of what AGO is about, and in fact has written a curriculum of additional information or teaching materials that would be added to the curriculum of the of all the. I really am losing it. And he'd be adding it to the curriculum of all residents in training, and that part of those questions of the Board of Ophthalmology would relate to questions that relate to AGO. That would be a sure way of accomplishing that. Do you ever get in a position when you see your spouse come in and you're trying to make a talk, and he or she suddenly appears and you no longer can talk anymore? Very embarrassing. Okay. At any rate, I'm going to be quick now. What I want to say is that I was talking about Hopkins a minute ago, and I talked about Dr. Haller. I wanted to also say that something about the Wilmer Institute, because it relates to fundraising. The idea for the Wilmer Institute did not come from Dr. Wilmer. It came from somebody named Aida DaCosta Root, and then eventually Breckenridge. Mrs. Breckenridge, as she's known, is a person who had no previous relationship to eyes, except that she had severe glaucoma, and she was a patient of Dr. Wilmer's. And she said to him one day, I love it when somebody quotes it, "I sent for Dr. Wilmer," she said. Not many people send for Dr. Wilmer, but anyway, he came and they discussed the fact that she felt there should be some institution named for him that he would lead. And he apparently agreed that that wouldn't be all that bad. But he said, but you're not to approach my patients in this. My patients are not to be financially challenged. So she was distressed because his patients were her first targeted thought. He had a man that worked in his office, a cleanup man of great loyalty to Dr. Wilmer, but he understood what she wanted. His name was William. William went through his files and gave her the names and addresses of all the leading patients that he had whom she contacted. That was definitely priming the pump, which led to medium-sized and then ultimately very large contributions from large institutions, one of which was about half the cost of the building, and they decided it should be in Baltimore and not in Washington, and that became the Wilmer Institute. It's really, one more about Ms. Breckenridge. Ms. Breckenridge moved from Baltimore to New York about the time when a little after when my father went to New York, about 1933. And so when he had the idea that he'd have an eye bank, he first had a doctor's widow who was helping him on that. And she was there very temporarily, and it was inexperienced. And Mrs. Breckenridge took over as the fundraiser, as the director of this hypothetical organization. And it would be logical to say that it wouldn't have happened. The Wilmer Institute would never have existed without her. The first eye bank in the world probably would never have materialized without having had a very strong fundraiser. The same will apply to our global ophthalmology. If academic global ophthalmology is able to find an angel in the wings, or many ones that will be initially strongly supportive, and that in turn will lead to enough endowment or other available funding so that AGO could become an important topic of conversation throughout the institutes in the United States and abroad, then I feel it's really launched and its future is very promising, and that Wills will be the instigation of such a remarkable entity. So I have one idea. You know, when you say, well, if you can raise money, then put your money where your mouth is, so to speak. I had one idea that I wanted to mention. It may be naive, but I've been buying books, as you probably all have, from Amazon. And very often I choose a secondhand book or a third book, of a book that's probably had more hands, either in good condition or medium condition or bad condition. And for a couple of bucks, sometimes you can get one in bad condition, and for $5 you get a pretty good one. But you probably realize that the sources of those books are entities throughout the country, and they're people who have put together a library system, and they submit their list of available books to Amazon, so that when somebody writes and asks for it, if they don't want to buy it directly as a new book, or if it isn't a book that's now being sold new, they tell you where you can get it, or they take care of it. If you check it off with Amazon, and then Amazon gets in touch with the person who has the book you want, and they send it directly from there. They do the shipping, and then they split the profit with Amazon. Well, it's my understanding that that's a very lucrative thing to do. And if it were possible that Wills could have a volunteer staff of people who love books, like as I do, and would care to initiate something like that in behalf of academic global ophthalmology, it would be, I think, a very strong sign of Wilmer's own involvement Wills's own involvement, not Wilmer, own involvement in this undertaking, and therefore I think it would be a really good signal for people who are also being asked to contribute money to say this is being vigorously pursued within our own institution. Now, there are probably some of you who know whether that's a practical suggestion or not, but anyway, it's a suggestion, and I felt that I should make one. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up. I just want to thank you again for listening to me and to hear some comments from somebody who is completely convinced about the validity and the need for this kind of a entity to spring up. When I saw the ACGME list of the 6 principles earlier, I thought every one of those falls in line with what we're talking about in AGO. I also, when we talk about ophthalmology, and you wonder about whether medical students would be interested, I've always felt that although I did a lot of teaching medical students when I was on the faculty, 2 faculties, I always thought we have to be very careful about teaching medical students, because we really probably, with good teaching, probably all of them would want to be ophthalmologists. So in fairness to the other specialties, with care, I certainly endorse that this be taken up. Anyhow, thank you very much, and I don't know, I'll answer whatever questions I might be able to do informally. I don't want to keep you here any longer, unless you have something you really want to say and point out what I should have said, or to ask whatever I do.